Welcome to the Media Cat Magazine podcast. Thank you for tuning in for the next in our series, Rebel with a Cause, with me, Opal Turner. For this series, we're talking about the relationship between creativity and strategy, or in my other words, art, science and logic. It's my pet theory that strategy and planning can be a creative secret weapon and vice versa, and that we overly separate disciplines in our industry. So today, we are joined by the Chief Engineer of Building Internal Bridges, Asad Shaykh. Asad is Head of Strategy at Grey London and Group Strategy Director at Pride in London, and it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Opal, for having me. Very, very excited to be here, and what a great thing to talk about on a Friday.
I mean, I think so, but I'm not biased at all. So let's delve right in. Can we just start with learning a bit about you? I mean, you've got these incredible positions that you're working in at the moment. Can you just tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to this point?
So, being South Asian, of course, I come from a family of doctors, and I like to call myself the white sheep of the family, actually. I think the journey it's been really, really interesting without going into the Jurassic era when I was born. I always had quite a keen interest towards art, media, and design. I did my undergrad in computer sciences, so I think that's where the logic or the function part of being a strategist started forming, because you start thinking about problem solving in a modular way. Then my propensity towards creativity, always being the odd one out, always being attracted to these things in the media, and also self-expression, I think got me towards a little more towards the arts. Then it's like I'm putting that together. So I like art and I like self-expression, but then I do love a commercial challenge as well. So of course, and when I've looked around, it's like, like advertising, strategy, brand planning is just the perfect marriage of both those skill sets. So I thought I'll try my hand at that, and that's where we are. So of course, I mean, I worked all over, across lots of different brands, lots of different agencies. Now I call Grey my home. For Pride in London, when I was studying here in the UK doing my masters, I experienced my first Pride in London, and I just felt so unbelievably welcomed I just felt that London just gave me a massive hug. And I think based on that, and that was a good 15 years ago, if not more. And that's where this for London giving me a home, I just wanted anybody and everybody else who comes to London who feels they are the other, to give back to them. And that's where I started volunteering for Pride in London 4 or 5 years ago. Now here we are. So it's been a mishmash of things, adventures and experiences, but I'd regret nothing.
Of course. And I wonder, so our theme for the month is idols. We're exploring idols, but we're exploring that idea of whether idolizing people is ever actually a good thing, and if so, how is it a good thing? So I'm wondering if along your journey, have there been any kind of key people in your career that you've idolized, or, just leveling it down slightly, have just been pivotal to that journey and the lessons that you've learned on it?
I think that's a phenomenally important question, and I wish I had a lovely pre-packaged answer for that. But as you can see, my journey, I personally think everybody's journey is very unique. But being where I am and who I am as a queer brown immigrant, who's working as a head of strategy and then also working Pride in London, I didn't get to see many people who went on a similar journey. However, not having an idol is less important. Having allies is so much more important. Having allies that you look up to, and they are whatever they are doing in whatever they feel. They might be adjacent to you, or they might be older than you, more experienced, younger. It doesn't really matter. But it's where you find inspiration. I think that's very, very important. So along the journey, I found many people who have inspired me to stitch together this journey that I've been on, And I love the Marion Edelman writes saying about you can't be what you can't see. And I've really just kind of taken it to heart, and just to demonstrate, if a journey like mine can be valid, accepted, and I'm sitting here talking to you, that could be anybody's journey. So it's very important to tell the stories of your own journey, not in hopes or desires of becoming an idol, just so that if you can inspire somebody else, as other people, as the allies that were on my way inspired me, I think that if I can do that, that my job is done. And I love linking that quote with Gandhi's quote about be the change you want to see in the world, because I think they're sister quotes. And so exactly, like if you can't find an idol, then find the allies that will help you become somebody else's. And I think if all of us start doing that, I think the whole society will be a better place.
Beautiful, stunning. I have nothing, I have no words. I can simply not add anything to that. So bringing you back down to the Adland for a hot second, is there any work that you idolised or that you feel has had kind of, that you've worked on or anyone else has worked on, that you feel has had that kind of pivotal cultural value that you feel has done a similar thing in terms of moving society forward?
I think any work, frankly, I think just focusing just on one piece of work was quite difficult, but I think any work that really looks at society and then sees what is happening right now and has the courage to reflect it in a way that is positive is phenomenal work. It really, really is. So maybe 10 years ago, it could have been something entirely different. Now it could be something entirely different. So I think, and I guess that also links back to the question about idols. I think idols do change. So I think an ideal piece of work also changes quite a bit. But I think recently the work, for example, I love the work Bodyform is doing about how the female reproductive system or genitalia works, which has been working like that for centuries, millennia. So, but understanding that this is a conversation that needs to be had, we can't ignore that, and then bringing it to the fold. I think that's just phenomenal. I think pieces like that are not just work. I think they're culture defining. So, I think that's wonderful. There's some fantastic work coming out which supports our trans siblings. I think that's extremely important. I think it's the JB Whiskey work, I think, which came out about like there's a beautiful piece of work which is this older man who applies makeup in secret from hiding from his wife and his family, and you're always thinking about, I shouldn't go Google it, right? Like really, it's in a great piece of work. I'm not going to reveal it, but I just think it was such a beautiful story of acceptance towards one of the most marginalized communities in the world right now, which is the trans community. So I think it is the work which puts forward, it doesn't have to be meaningful or purposeful. It just needs to be truthful and reflective of what is going on around us. I think sometimes we get really caught up in, we need to have meaning and we need to be purposeful. And I don't think it's that. It's just to look around you. The people who need a platform. There are people who want to be understood. And just if you just take an observation like that and then actually link it to either the product or the service that you're trying to convey, that's just genius. And that's the kind of work I love.
I couldn't agree more. I think it even the Libras Bodyform work is super important to start conversations, but also just witnessing it as a woman who was assigned female at birth, I feel seen and validated in my experience, and that's purposeful. Even if it never changed a single conversation in the real world, it changed something in me. And I think we forget sometimes, because don't get me wrong, effectiveness is incredibly important. we are working towards business KPIs. All of that is great, but sometimes I do think that we forget that the emotional impact that we have on individuals can in some ways be so much more powerful, because they become an ambassador of you and your brand and what you do. And I've done that so many times for brands I don't even buy from. I find, like, Patagonia, I'm not an outdoorsy person. Not an outdoorsy person at all. I'm like very much an inside gal. But I will always talk about their work, share their work, comment and support it when it's in digital media and all of that kind of thing, because it says something that I believe in, regardless of whether I buy from that brand or not. And I think that can be equally purposeful.
But Opal, I think you just quite beautifully unlocked the equation which links emotion and effectiveness, right? Like, if you can create a connection, an emotional connection with your audience based on the audience's cultural values, whatever they might be, that is the first step towards creating an action. It's no rocket science. It's basic psychology, right? Once that action is taken, that is then the first step towards effectiveness, right? So I think we sometimes get so lost in, like, we have to be purposeful, and then we start to be over at one side, and then we have to do something else for effectiveness. They are so intrinsically linked. And that's why I always say and I know we're going to explore a little bit more of that as this conversation moves forward, that there's a really simple link between emotion and function. It really, really is. So if we focus on emotion, which really is the only way you can connect with somebody emotionally, is to understand what matters to them. And that is by understanding the culture that you're in. And that is how you will extract value out of that. And I think that's something, I personally believe in. I think at Grey, we talk about cultural value almost ad nauseum. We are slightly obsessed with it. But and I know cultural value might seem like a really, really big statement, but it is truly just understanding what matters to all of us, all individuals, and then creating a message or creating an experience around it that will instill emotion, that will result in action. That's it.
Exactly. And it can be at any one of those levels. It might be going out and buying the product immediately, but it also might be just taking that first step on that process, essentially.
And also, Opal, if I may add to that, I think absolutely the going out and buying the product or availing the services, as advertisers, marketers, we will want that, right? But I think we need to think about us a step before that as well. We are functioning in it's not a financial economy, it's not a capitalistic economy, we are functioning in attention economy, right? People have, our attention is more, I don't like the word divided because it's quite negative. I think our attention is being nourished by a lot of different stimuli. Right? And the brain has tremendous power. It's not going to shut down because of a lot of stimuli. We love it. And I think as we move forward, the younger generation has even more capacity to absorb so many different things and make such beautiful things out of it. But if we are functioning in an attention economy, just finding a little space within that where your message lands based on some sort of an emotional connection, that's a win for me right there. Because when that's landed and that's lodged in somebody's brain and the memory structures are made, whether you do immediately go out the product or you might buy the product, might not buy the product. But eventually when that product or service will come in front of you in the point of decision, you will be like, ping, 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 ting, ting, ting. That's the one I want. And that's a win.
It's setting up that psychological structure, as you kind of put it, to be ready for that moment. And so let's dig into that to the core of the podcast, I guess. Really, I describe strategy and creativity as kind of art, science, and logic, and encountered many people who feel that you can't very well have a mind that works both ways. But everything you just said, you can't see this, listeners, but I'm just nodding a lot. And I am just so intrigued. How do you think, you've expressed it quite beautifully already, But I'm interested when it comes to thinking of your own self and your own mind, and your own work. How do you think of how kind of your brain works and how you work in terms of those two kind of separate things that we really truly believe are intertwined?
I think that's such an interesting question. So if I had known how my mind worked, I would have saved a lot of money on counseling.
Preach.
But so I'm still on that journey, and I think that's a lifelong journey. And you know what? That's a lifelong journey to understand how your mind works. So any ways or means that can help you do that, go for it. Your mind is the best gift that has been given to you by nature or by anything, anybody, or any deity that you believe in. As far as how my mind works, I think there is a bit of a mind and body connection as well. I think that, as you can see, like I always think quite a lot in harmony, because I like to think in harmony, because I don't necessarily, being who I am, I don't like labels. I've never thought of it that way. And I think sometimes we divide our own ways of not being but doing into labels and divisions as well. One thing which I go for is, and as my hair has gone grey, which I started to believe a little more, is instinct. You know, when you have the right solution when it comes to strategy, or when you have the right idea when it comes to creative, your body should react to it. And you should listen to that. You know, and you know what? And a lot of people, I've asked this question to a lot of creators, and it's my favorite pub question. It's like, it's not like what brought you into advertising or strategy or creative. It's like, what keeps you here? Because what brings us into is ambition, prestige, glory. But what keeps me at least here, and a lot, this answer is echoes with a lot of the people that I've talked to, is that feeling that you get when you come up with an idea, right? So if that is what we're chasing all the time, lean into that a little bit more. Understand when you come to a solution, whether it's, like I said, creative or strategy, what does your instinct say? If it excites you, and if you can't wait to share that with somebody else, you're on the right track. So there are lots of ways, there are hundreds and hundreds of frameworks how you get to that point, but it's so important to understand when you get to that point, that is the right point. So for me, it is just chasing that high until I get it right. And that's what I try to do. And I know it's not like, again, it's not emotional, functional or something. It's something which is quite intrinsic, which is instinctive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as someone who does both, I feel like I absolutely get the same physical, mental, emotional reaction when I come to a great insight or a great solution or a great idea or a great execution. It feels the same.
You know it in your bones. You know it in your bones. And I think it's and as I've gotten older, I think there are so many, when you're practicing something new when you're younger, there's generally like, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? It's like, and almost in my 30s, we're all about learning. My 40s will be like are going all about unlearning a lot of self-doubt, unlearning a lot of things like, is this right or this is wrong, and trusting your instinct. So, but if you can start honing those earlier on, you will come to the right solutions, ideas, and you will express them in a much more passionate way, because that's our job.
100%. Couldn't love that idea that you start by learning and then you carry on by unlearning all the things that don't serve you. I mean, if that's not a life plan, then I don't know what is. So I'm intrigued. So I mean, it's, as you say, I love that they just don't exist within you in this kind of binary way that so much of society forces absolutely everything into. But is there something specifically about that connecting data, that connecting that, computer science is part of your brain with that creative storytelling brain that gets you super excited, that gives you that feeling that you always ask everyone else about? I'm asking you.
So I know everybody says this, right? And I think they're all right. I'm not, I'm not definitely not criticizing this. Like that we have to tell a story, right? Of course. But then when this question has been asked, then I really wanted to get into like it's so easy to say you tell a story, right? But I just need to, maybe the modular mind, I just needed to dissect a little bit what it is. So if you think about it, any story is all about delivering information with emotion, right? So if the information is all the data points that you have, the emotion is how do you link them together. If you get that right, then you have a story that will resonate and people will remember.
Fascinating. It's actually so interesting that you say that, because the last interview I recorded with the lovely Stu Lambert from Blurred, he was the first person who's ever said to me, I think storytelling is a strategic process. It's the 3 and 5 act structure. And that's almost exactly what you're saying, is there's these points that you have to hit. That's all we're doing. But there is then connecting those in an emotional, human way.
And that's like, for example, like Cinderella's story arc is 3,000 years old. It is one of the old, and that's also the hero story. And I know there are I think 3 or 4, or maybe hundreds more frameworks of telling a story, but they all follow a particular path. It's like there are in exactly what Sri Lambert said, like it's like connecting those dots, but understanding what those dots have to say and how do you connect them with a cadence that people will remember. And once that is clear, I think the craft is the beauty. That's where, because even now, we live in an age of data, and data is extremely important. Absolutely, almost that there is a surplus of data, right? But the best use of it is, and the people who use it the best, is the craft of how they connect those dots together to tell newer stories, more original stories, more poignant, more resonant stories as well. So that's something, and that's a lifelong process of learning and understanding. How do you connect that as well? But I know that, but as bare bones, that's where we start, and then we add flourish to it with all that we have and the stories that we've lived through and the stories that we've been told as well.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, which is basically my answer to every single thing you say at this point, but there we go. I wonder, have you always been, it seems that now that you really fully understand yourself as and those processes as fully entwined, but was it always that way for you? Did you have that instinct and trust that from early on? Or did you fight to a degree with the way that society does make us pit those things against each other often? The question I'm asking is, did you face any challenges from the industry, from people within the industry, the way that the industry has historically and specifically at the beginning of the digital boom kind of tried to disconnect data from creative and put people in different departments and forced, as society often does, these binaries and created some tension between those two? Or did you always have that innate knowledge that you knew that they were connected and you just kept fighting that fight?
No, of course not. I mean, I think I, like everybody else, I've been on a journey in that, and I think what you previously said beautifully as well. It's like, we are so generally as a society, we're obsessed with labels, and we as human beings, we like reductionism, right? Because it helps us understand the unbelievably complex world that everybody lives in, right? So then it's just easy, and also you go into there is always a tension between what needs to be done and how it shall be done. And let me explain that. Like, in a way that what needs to be done is the output, but how shall it be done? It has to form some structure. So people or agencies or any kind of organization which has a particular output has to be divided into different departments, and those departments need to have different roles. Having those different roles give people within those departments meaning, they understand what they're doing, and then you have to connect those things together. So there is rhyme and reason how it is and what it is. I think as I think a majority of us are a function of those, and it's like, and then we go back to about unlearning all of that in a way that you provide something original. I think earlier, especially with the proliferation of digital media and more channels, I think all of us got, especially me, I got a little obsessed with what do I have to say? It's like, what do I have to say? It's like, what do you have to say? What do you have to say? What do you have to say? What I then, within that, and not having a bigger picture at that point in time is, but I forgot, like, why do I have to say it? And I think once I started realizing, like, why do I have to say, and why am I creating this output? Because being so obsessed with the output, the reasoning behind it kind of went away. And I know this can rise above organizational structures to something which is much more simpler. It's like, when it comes, like, don't be obsessed about what you have to say. And I think a lot of people are, because they want a certain kind of output from you. Do think about, why do you have to say it? And then comes the how, which is the creative expression of it. So I think in my mind is, what is the information? Why is the purpose? And then how is the idea? And once you start putting all of these things together, it just makes sense. It really is not rocket science, but of course we have to function in particular ways that sometimes get in the way. But if we start thinking about that, that makes it easy.
Absolutely. And is there any, just to those organizational structures, is there a specific way that you kind of work with your teams, or with your team's mindsets, how you structure projects, meetings, etc.? Is there any specific ways that you've kind of come up with over the years of really aiding that process on a practical level?
Of course. And I think that it's to be long-winded answer to the previous question. Let me be short about this one. But I think it set up the stage. So if strategy is the why, then a strategy department has to produce the why. Why should this matter to the audience? Why are we doing this? Then the creativity is the how. How are we going to express it, right? So there is an intrinsic relationship between the why and the how. They cannot exist in isolation. It's like, how can a why and a how exist in isolation? It's so simple. Once the departments have very clearly know that I need to produce a why that needs to feed into the how, but the how could question the why. It's like, why are we doing this? And the why can question the how. That's the kind of relationship I love to foster in between departments. I work with, and that, it creates two things. It creates accountability, because Strat needs to have a responsibility of the why, and creative has to have the responsibility of the how. It also encourages interconnectivity, which is open dialogue between the two, and debate as well. And that, because everybody has to defend what they're trying to say, that friction then creates something which is seamless. It really is like two paint colors coming together and creating something new. And again, I might be being a little poetic about that, but it is. I do think things like this are not that complex. We just need to get the basic philosophy of creative work right. And if we get that, I think that tears down a lot of boundaries. It takes people out of these particular roles. I need to write a brief, and I need to present it into a platter to the creative director. The creative director will take it and just go somewhere else and take them on a mountain and think of something amazing. These are like such interesting stories that have been set up. And yes, of course, like I say, they have been set up because there are departments, there are functions, there's productivity, profitability, all of those things. But all those things do function really well if there is interconnectivity between the why and the how.
Absolutely. And what do you think? Do you think that has a connection, or that the lack of that interconnection in some cases has impacted the work that we make? The way, I think we can generally agree that as an industry, our work in some ways has been getting, in the traditional sense and from various papers, less creative. Do you think that has anything to do with our ability to, foster that interconnectivity?
I think it makes the difference between good work and great work. Work will be done, if people are working, they will create something. It's like, people, there are resources towards it, there will be an output. But the greatness of the work comes through the connection. The greatness of the work comes through this collision, and which we talk about quite a lot at Gray. We talk about the collision of difference quite a bit as well. And difference is something.
Love that phrase.
My personal mantra is difference is creativity's superpower. It really is. But unless those different points of view, different schools of thought, different opinions come together, that is the only way to make something new, and that is the only way to make something great. Otherwise, what happens most of the time, we go into an assembly line model. Creativity, automobiles can be made on assembly lines, and it's been for hundreds of years they've been made, and love cars. However, creativity, perhaps not so much. There is an inherent chaos within creativity which should be encouraged, and collisions should happen to create something new. That, again, this is not limited to advertising at all. It's limited to all idea generation.
I love that collision idea. The collision is where the magic happens, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And I know that you do a lot of mentoring, and over the years you've set up multiple schemes, etc., etc. And I wonder, what are the lessons that you've learned about those processes from the people that you've mentored? But also, is there anything that you've noticed recently? Are there any changes, any trends? Is there more or less of a openness to different disciplines? I just would love to know what some of your experience from that is.
So I think that the first part of this question, I mean, I actually believe in bi-directional mentoring. I think mentoring is it's always quite unidirectional. It's very hierarchical. I think, and I think that's just because if you go into mentoring, then you go into the history of apprenticeship, where there's somebody who is a master of their craft, and that somebody's coming in and they teach them that particular craft. I think when we talk specifically about advertising, I think we are talking about culture and what's current in culture. To find what's valuable in culture, my points of view, and I joke with my husband that one of my biggest fears is that I'm going to become the past references queen, which means all my cultural references are 10 years old, right? So if I'm functioning in culture, the people who are usually the people I'm mentoring are younger. They can teach me about subcultures that I don't know anything about, right? And vice versa. I can perhaps teach them a thing or two that I've learned along the way as well. So I think I don't necessarily see how the individuals are shifting when it comes to mentoring now. I feel that I want to bring a shift within what mentoring is really, so that it's a mutually learning experience. And I think ever since I started practicing that, it's been just so much. It's been so much fun. It's just been fun, and I think I think just if you can't learn if you're not having fun. And don't get me started about the school, the education system and all that.
Oh, good Lord, no. That's a whole different podcast episode. No, I love that, because I really think that's one of the things that we don't talk about with mentoring enough, especially with the industry's obsession with Gen Z at the moment. It's no, I'm pretty sure I'm learning more from them than they are from me.
100%. And when that honesty is there, it creates such an equal structure, which is great. And that equal structure then helps with collision. That equal structure helps with understanding culture. It helps in creating value. also, quickly for the second part of your question, which I really like, is like, what is there? What is generally the change that you see that might be happening within the industry? And I think, I mean, the industry is, because our industry is inherently linked with culture, and we're constantly trying to create value within it. Our industry is constantly changing, like culture is constantly changing. I think what's most exciting to me right now is the democratization of creative tools, which is so exciting. And I know some people are, it's like life threatening for some people and all that, that people are really afraid. But of course, I mean, everybody has the right to feel what they feel, and everybody's feelings are valid. However, I think that is creating a breed of creatives who are so, to them, more tools mean more expression, and that also means less barriers to express. And I just think that is so pure and interesting and exciting. I love this commentary on, for example, I know artificial intelligence. Everybody's talking about it. Artificial intelligence. It's coming out to get us. It's going to kill creativity. Just quickly, two things on that as an example. One is, I think human creativity has so much more resilience than it is just going to die just from artificial intelligence. Do you know why? Because our creativity is not linked to output. Our creativity is also linked to how we use creative tools like artificial intelligence to make something entirely new. As you can see, right now, there are so many AI-generated images. The funny thing is they all have started to look a little bit samey, right? Because the input to that is limited. Where is the input going to come from? From the human condition, of course. So the future belongs to me, especially in the mentoring space, and what young creativity is bringing into it. If the future, I believe, belongs to not people who are afraid of artificial intelligence. We shouldn't be afraid of artificial intelligence. We should be appreciative of people who know how to use it. And I think that knowing how to use these tools is changing our industry, and I think that's just so exciting.
I couldn't agree more. And when we're thinking of that future of the industry, do you think therefore that knowing how to use those AI tools, for instance, having an understanding of the Web3 space, potentially those kinds of things, do you think those are going to become kind of necessary skill sets for the future of the industry? Or do you think that they're maybe getting too much attention than they actually require?
So that's an interesting debate, right? Because they're all pieces of technology. I'm going to be a past references queen, and I'm going to reference the splitting of the atom now.
Yes. Come through.
So, of course, right? Like, at one point you had a wonderful reservoir of energy that is usable. On the other hand, it also created immense destruction as well, right? So technology will always have both the angel and the devil on its shoulders, right? It's how we use it. I think these are, again, like I said, these are all tools that perhaps I'm not exactly sure if they're going to be essential for particular types of creativity. But one thing, which is my open-hearted appeal to anybody who is creative, they're tools. Why wouldn't you want to learn how to use them? Why wouldn't you want to see like what beautiful ideas they will suck out of your head and put in front of people? I don't know. What is the battle here? And is the battle between an ego saying that what I know, and there's a whole theory about and which I really hope it doesn't apply to me, is that beyond 35, which I am, beyond 35, the technology that comes in, we start actually intentionally reject any technology coming out of 35 for some reason. But I think for a creative mind, it never ends. The more tools that we have for self-expression. So I don't see whether it's going to be a skill set that is required. I think if you are a creative spirit, yes, more power to creativity. And if these are the power tools, bring them.
Use them. Absolutely. And on the flip side then, Do you think there's any emotional, human, intangible skills that are becoming more important as the industry becomes more complex and our worlds become more complex?
I think and I love that question. And I'm just going to keep my theme of harmony because I think this conversation is as self-revelatory to me. I'm learning a lot more about myself. And I just think, I think there's harmony, right? I think when it comes to emotional skills or just skills, um, and it's linked to my previous answer around tools, is to understand difference. Understand difference, really. A lot of people talk about empathy, which I think is absolutely important. A lot of people talk about emotional. I think all of these things are important, but when I really thought about it, it's like, just understand difference of thought, difference of opinion, background. It will do you wonders. It will be your superpower. It could be also be the understand the difference of like, I don't know how to use this tool. It's so different to how I've done things in the past. Try to understand it. Whether it's a human psyche, try to understand it. I think that skill in I hope and I believe is always going to help you. It's always going to expose you to new ways of thinking and doing. And I think if that's not what creativity thrives on, I don't know what is.
So, and to do that, I mean, because it's a beautiful answer, and it is so complex and simple in perfect harmony, ironically. How do you feel? I mean, Grey's a big old beast of a company. How do you feel that, you know, those agencies, those studios, you know, magazines, whatever it might be, how do you feel that we can, is it truly just we need to get our mindsets right about those things, or are there structural things that we need to be doing to enable, well, firstly, we know our industry has a massive diversity and inclusion problem.
Indeed.
For instance, connecting to your Pride work, what is there on a structural level do you think that we need to be doing to make more kind of interconnected, harmonious, inclusive environments as an industry, whether that be because you are the magic of difference in being creative and strategic, or because you're brown and gay? And that is different in our industry, unfortunately. Is there anything that you think about how we can start improving that from kind of a structural level as well as a kind of simply philosophical?
So I think that's again a very important question. I think there is, just again linking to my previous answer, there are two things. Understanding difference is step number one, then welcoming difference is step number two. The challenge that we have is sometimes difference becomes fetishized.
Yes.
It becomes literally skin deep. And we feel, and that is usually happens when we disregard step number one, which is to understand difference. We just welcome difference in. Then when that starts happening, without understanding, it's like, oh, but this person is brown, just pick them in. This person is a particular background. We need to understand why we are bringing them in. These are, as like I said, our industry is rooted in culture, and culture will forever be obsessed with the new, right? When new different things come around, we start fetishizing them. Okay, let's just do this. And I think when I say to understand and welcome difference, it goes much deeper. It goes into, of course, I will always stand by, D&I principles that we should have, because that is just the doorway to welcoming different schools of thought. But even if it goes beyond race, ethnicity, background, color, religion, it also goes on, like, if you still have two seemingly very similar candidates in front of you, choose the one who's more different to you. Unfortunately, and they could still be both could be cis white gendered males, right? Like I'm not going into that, and both equally capable. Unfortunately, what starts happening is similarity bias kicks in, and we start choosing, which is plaguing our industry. And then we say, oh, the work is kind of the same. Like, of course, it's the same. If you're choosing the same people. So it's like understanding even the please choose the cis, gendered, heterosexual man who is at least different to you, that you feel a little tension with, that you feel that there is a different school of thought and there will be a little friction. Because otherwise, just will go and work in an accountancy firm.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm no disregard to the accountancy listeners. I think all of you are amazingly creative as well. But I just think if we are functioning in a creative industry and our output has to be original, unique, and needs to create some sort of cultural value, it needs to start with an input.
Absolutely. It's almost intentionally creating space for those collisions to happen, setting up the space for those to happen. Again, cannot simply add any more. It's like, do I have something intelligent to say that's better than that? Absolutely not. Of course I don't. And so finally, my last question, which I've tied myself to and I continue with. What about my theory that creatives and strategy need each other and could potentially work together more closely, more harmoniously, etc.? Do you agree?
100%, actually, 1,000%. 1,000%. Number one, because it is a marriage. I've been in one for 10 years, so I might have a little bit of experience. Still my first marriage, though, let's see. But let's just go with what I have right now. Of course, it is a marriage, and if there is communication and mutual respect and understanding, it will add value to your life. And I've always said that, and I think it's because I think creatives and strategists are partners. And I've always lived by this fact in my personal life as well. Choose a partner that challenges you and respects you, because that will help in your growth. And then you'll make something, whether it's a life in personal life or an ad in a professional life, will make something which is valuable and is memorable. And at the end, the second point is the consumer or the client, more importantly, the consumer. The consumer does not see strat or creative. They see the output. And if that is wonderful, beautiful, interesting, valuable, and original, and it comes from a harmonious place, it will land well, it will be memorable, it will stay with our consumers and our audiences, and will probably, hopefully, create pathways towards some sort of action that's based on emotion.
Because humans aren't just one thing, so the work we make can't just be one thing. Simple as that. We've solved it. It's done. So, thank you so much, Asad. Is there any other things that you would like to tell our lovely listeners about, or leave us with, or any exciting work that you're working on that you'd like to shout out, or wonderful team members even that you'd like to shout out before we leave the podcast?
Oh no, I just think a shout out to my Pride in London team, who absolutely, who has took me on a journey of truly, apart from being the other, but understanding the other. And I think that's something that I am really looking forward to. Wish me luck. I think right now the other is like 20, 30, 40 years ago, the other was gays and lesbians. Now the other are non-binary people and our trans siblings. So I would love for Pride in London to start focusing a little bit more on a positive projection of them and their identities in our culture. I think I also would give a massive shout out to Grey London, especially Laura, who is our president, who is just a wonderful, wonderful human being. Absolute queen who has, and I guess I can just obviously sing her praises forever, but I think the proof of really trying to change the industry is me sitting in this position and letting me do whatever I want to do in whatever way I want to do it with. So I think, and also the entire team that she has built around each and every one of them who has supported me in this journey and now I sit here speaking very, very openly with you. I think the absolute last thing I think it's going to go back to where my journey started from is to anybody who's listening, do not ever compromise who you are. That is your originality. You might be in spaces where people might not understand that. Trust me, you will find other spaces, places, and faces who will. But do not compromise who you are for the ones who don't.
Well, perfect message to end on. Thank you so much, Asad. It's been such an extreme pleasure. I feel like I've had multiple validations and epiphanies and just wonderful moments throughout this. And I really hope that comes through to all of our listeners. It's been such a joy to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much. But likewise, thank you so much for taking me on this journey as well. And thank you so much for your intelligence, kindness, and thank you for doing this really just spreading people's emotions, intelligence, helping them share their stories. I think that's just inspirational. So please keep on doing what you're doing.